Welcome to the show, everybody. We currently use the term witch trials when we're referring back to history um, to reference the persecution of those that practiced other methods than what the church held as doctrine. It began in the 1400s in Europe, and this hysteria spread to the New World in the 1600s with the arrival of Puritan colonists. While the hysteria was beginning to wane in Europe, the Puritans from East Anglia were about to ratchet up the intensity and lead into a period that would be forever remembered in history. Author Peter Muise joins us tonight to cover this case and more, which are featured in his latest work, Witches and Warlocks of Massachusetts, Legends, Victims, and Sinister Spellcasters. Peter Muise, author, is next. Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name is Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is right. Justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, gentlemen, let's get it out of the way right now. Let's just get it out of the way. I'm 46. No, let's just get it out of the way. I'm 46. I'm on that side of 45 now. Oh well, here we go. So, yeah. So, how's your week been, gentlemen?
Long,
busy.
It has. Yeah. Welcome everybody to the show. Ronald, hello there. How are you? Now, at this time, let's bring on Peter Muise, the guest of the show. Peter, how are you, sir?
Great, excited to be here. My hair was standing up from your spooky intro a little bit, so I'm really ready. What little hair I have was standing up.
I'm right there. It's going away too. I won't lie. The hats are covering it. I mean, It gets to the point where it's just going to be shaved. I won't do the comb over. I refuse.
He'll do it. He's bald.
It's going to happen. But yeah, what I teased. So we're going to show here. First off, like I said, this book was released September 21st, correct?
September 1st.
September 1st.
Yep.
All right. I don't know who wrote that 2 on there. Me. All right. So September 1st. How's it been received so far by readers and critics?
Good. I mean, I've been having a lot of fun, mostly going on podcasts and radio shows promoting it just because of kind of the COVID situation up here. So that's what I've been doing, and just promoting on social media, things like that. So I've been having a lot of fun just reaching out to people and talking to people who have similar interests in this type of topic.
And then this is the one I just brought up on the screen here for everybody to see. Those that aren't watching and they're listening. Witches and Warlocks of Massachusetts, Legends, Victims, and Sinister Spellcasters. It's out. You can purchase this at Amazon, Kindle paperback, I believe, and it's available in other major booksellers as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop, really wherever you buy books online, you can buy it.
So that check that out. It's really well priced. One, from reading it, you put a lot of time and effort in researching this book. I mean, this isn't just 12 to 14 font, double spaced. No, there is a lot of stuff crammed in there. And for those that require them, there are a couple pictures.
Yes. It's I really, I've been really interested in local folklore for a long time, and I grew up in Massachusetts. I've lived in Massachusetts most of my life, and I've lived in New England really all my life. So I, at a certain point, was really interested in like learning about local folklore. So I started to read about it and study it and things like that. And one thing I really wanted was a book that had all the witch stories in one place. And I kept looking for it, and that book just didn't exist. Like you could get books about the Salem witch trials, a lot of those, and a few other books maybe about witchcraft in the Puritan era, but not one that had all the witchcraft stories. So that's what I tried to do, but I just didn't have enough space. So this is like almost all the witch stories. This is like all the witch stories that I really, really liked. So
Yeah, that's one, and we'll get into a few of those too. And that's, you kind of touched on that, where I was going to ask you, it's where you came and then to be about this book. You also have another title available on there, Legends and Lore of the North Shore, which follows, what was that one about? I haven't read that one yet.
So the North Shore is, it's the term for all the coastal towns north of Boston, like from Boston up to the New Hampshire border. Those towns along the coast are called the North Shore. So that's a really old part of the state and old part of the country. That's where Salem, Massachusetts is. So those towns are founded like the 1630s, 1640s. And so Legends of Lore of the North Shore is just stories from those towns north of Boston. So stories about pirates, witches, monsters, strange locations, things like that, like some paranormal stuff. There's like a Bigfoot sighting from Newburyport, Massachusetts. So just things like that in there. It was very focused on that specific region of the state, basically.
Oh, awesome. And for more information on that too, people just go to newenglandfolklore.blogspot.com. And I've got that up on the screen for those watching. Same thing, you go there. This blog, that as he goes through there, you've got quite the catalog of stuff, like you said, going back all the way to 2008.
Yeah, and it's,
so.
I to say a little bit about myself, like I was born in the late 60s, and then I kind of grew up as a kid in the 70s. In the 1970s, sort of paranormal and occult topics started to become really popular in the media. So there are movies about Bigfoot or UFOs, like In Search Of, the TV show suddenly appeared, right? And which I think is the ancestor of all the paranormal shows we have today. And so I would watch those shows. I had an older brother who was also really into UFOs and really into Bigfoot. And so I kind of grew up with a lot of that in my environment. And then I was also the type of kid who was really into like folklore, mythology, all that sort of like stuff like Greek mythology, Norse mythology. I studied like anthropology in college, so more folklore. And then at some point I was like, my brain was full of all this weird information. I didn't know what to do with it. So I started the blog. Like, I'm going to start this blog and just kind of put the weird stuff I've learned out there in the world. So that was in 2008. And I've been writing it ever since. And as I said before the show started, like, if you ever watch a horror movie and someone goes into the haunted house and there's like the musty book that you open up and it's covered in cobwebs, that's kind of what my blog is like, because it's so old in terms of the internet. Like a 13-year-old blog feels really ancient, I think, in internet terms, But I still update it several times a month.
Yeah, so like I said, you just had a couple of, I think, posts this month, last month in September. Yeah. And I didn't touch on it. You also got, I'm going to butcher the university, so I'm going to let you, and I want to say it's Brandeis.
Yeah, I went to Bates College and Brandeis University. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm 2 for 2. Yes. For anybody who didn't know, I went with I'd never heard his last name pronounced, and so I asked him, is it pronounced Muise? And he's like, yes. I'm like, yes. So I got Muise and Brandeis correct on this. So man, I'm batting 1,000. Happy birthday!
Yeah, you're winning.
All right. Yeah. So what'd you major in at Brandeis?
I majored in anthropology. I got 2 anthropology degrees, and I realized I wasn't really cut out to be an academic. That was not really what my personality is made for, because a lot of it's a lot of alone time, right? And I'm a little more of a social person. But I also appreciated what I learned, and I also appreciate like learning research methods and things like that. So I kind of brought that forward when I wrote a book like this. Like, I really like to do some research, look at the footnotes, and find out where people are getting their information. Can that help me with my information? Things like that. So
yeah, when just like as we go into this thing, people, when you purchase this book, you're going to see this is really well laid out. This is really well done. Like I said, it's one of those like page turns, like you just keep reading the story and you don't realize, just as you're going through it, just you don't feel like you're reading like an actual book. You feel like it's just somebody that's got a collection of stories, which is, I really enjoyed. It wasn't just like this breakdown. It was a nice, just goes through here and it says, here's this, we go through here, and just the way you laid it out, I really enjoyed. So very
Thank
well
you.
done.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out with all these stories from like 400 years of witchcraft stories, like how do I organize them? And so I just decided to put them by area of the state and different city and town, but also I tried to shake it up. So there's like stories from the Puritan era, there are 19th century legends, there are 20th and 21st century paranormal encounters. So really have a broad mix of information in there for people, just to show like how, the first kind of witch stories in Massachusetts and how witch stories are still being told in Massachusetts, 350, 400 years later.
Well, and I'll show this on the picture for people that are watching, just kind of give you guys a tease here too. This is, I've got it up here on the screen, so from the Kindle, so people could see it. You've got, so just to show you just the list, these are all stories. This is how you just laid it as you go. And like I said, it's an awesome read. It really is. You go through, and each one of these are different cases. And just going through, and each one of them, there wasn't one where it was just like, where you have those like, not interested. You read one and you're like, I want to get to the next one. I want to get to the next one. It just the way it was done was, and I even liked in the beginning the way you got out. And one of the questions I had for you too is, when we'll get into there, is you had the Governor John Winthrop.
Yeah.
And you kind of went into that. And that's one of the ones, did you, through your research, and when you're doing these, did you find out, and the way, tell me if I've worded this wrong, weird or not, but do you believe like his crusade against witches, warlocks, that was a genuine belief in religion? Or do you think this was more of his way of, I have a way of controlling the population through fear, and this kind of is going to help me keep my position of power?
I think that it's hard to say, like, to travel back in time and read people's minds. I sadly don't have that power, but I think the Puritans who came to Massachusetts from England and founded, Massachusetts and Connecticut and the other New England states. They were really religious people, and their goal was to set up, a religious, basically theocratic state in New England, which they did for a while. For a while, it was pretty much a Puritan state here. And they did believe that the world was a battleground between God and the devil. The Puritans thought they were on God's side, and they thought pretty much everybody else was on the devil's side. And if you think of their belief in witches, the witches are almost like the devil's secret agents, right? Like the Puritans knew, like, okay, the French Canadians, those people are clearly on the devil's side because they're Catholic and they're trying to like prevent us from colonizing North America, or like the Native Americans, they're on the devil's side because they're not Christian, or whoever, right? They had these very clear lines of who they thought was evil. But then the witches were kind of people within the community that you didn't know were a witch, and then therefore they were kind of like secretly doing the devil's work within the community. And none of it is true. Like, there were not any real witches. I really want to be really clear. Like, there were no witches in the Salem witch trials. It was just innocent people who were accused. But this is what they believed. So I think they were honest in their belief that they were witches for the most part, because there also were skeptics at the time who were like, yeah, no, there are no witches. But they generally were overruled by the other people at the time.
Yeah, and that's one, I'm gonna kind of nerd out for you. Have you ever watched Outlander?
The movie?
The show?
I haven't seen the show. No, about the time traveling show. No, I haven't.
Yeah, no, the Outlander's the one on Stars. I'm gonna say it. Yeah. And one of the characters, Claire, she's a healer, but she's in a couple. Spoiler alert! In one of the things, she's accused of being a witch, and so just help everybody. So it's one of those. I think there's a few people where, do I believe that there's somebody out there, like I said, cackling, making brews, turning people into newt, doing stuff like, it's like, no. But was there somebody, and one of the stories, let me get this here so I don't butcher this one. It was really sad too. It's and I want to say it was that first one that you did.
Yeah, Margaret Jones.
The husband and wife team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Margaret Jones was the
Mhm.
first person executed in Massachusetts for witchcraft. So she was executed in 1648. And so the Salem witch trials were in 1692. So you've got like around 50 years of witch trials happening. So Margaret Jones moved to Charlestown, Massachusetts, which is now part of Boston, with her husband. She was a healer and she was really successful at it. She would sort of treat people with these very simple herbal remedies, put like anise seeds in brandy, like really basic stuff. But her cures work, they're very effective. And that sort of made people a little suspicious almost. Like she was almost too good at healing. Like, how can she be so good? It doesn't seem quite natural. And right, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Didn't quite
Yep.
seem
Oh, yeah.
natural as she was healing people. And so people started to whisper that perhaps she was a witch. And then she was put on trial for it. And then some other people came forward and said, well, she told me I wouldn't recover unless I took her medicine. Well, obviously that's the case, right? Because she was a healer. But they sort of took that as a threat almost, that she was like threatening to curse them if they didn't use her medicine. And she was executed for being a witch based on really slim evidence, I would say. And her husband was also accused, but he was not found guilty, and he kind of fled the Massachusetts colony.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
Well, that's kind of where I went with the Outlander reference. Is it was the same type of thing. I mean, you think with back here, for anybody that doesn't know the period, you've got a headache. Well, that's because there's a good chance you're diagnosed as you have a demon, and we must some sort of bloodletting. We have to drill a hole in your head to relieve so that this bad stuff can escape. And then you have somebody like Margaret Jones that comes along, like, no, just chew on this herb, and all of a sudden your headache goes away, and all of a sudden she's with the devil. And it's such, as you do that, you realize just almost it's a miracle that we made it this far. It really is. It is so barbaric the way that here you have somebody, you simply look, it's like you can just look through nature. You can see the way, you see an animal's got an upset stomach. They start chewing on something. You have these people that use their head, and that's where and you outline these in your stories, and that's the part I love. And it just shows right here there, like you said, there wasn't anybody that fits the definition of the cackling witch that's doing these things.
Right. Yeah, it's just it was like a projection, right? I think the Puritans were looking for somebody to blame for their problems. Like, my child is sick, my cow isn't giving any milk, like the butter isn't churning, all these things that just things that go wrong in everybody's life. They were looking for a reason why it was happening to them. And who do you blame? But you blame the person in the village who is, the old cranky woman down the street that nobody likes. Maybe it was often women, not always women, but it's the woman maybe who had premarital sex, like, ooh, scandalous, right? Maybe she must be a witch if she would commit that sin of premarital sex. Think of the other sins she would commit. You have a lot of that in the Puritan era. It's like they were just looking for somebody to blame, I think.
So what is your all-time favorite witch story? Did you put that, spoiler alert, did you put that number one in your book? What is your all-time favorite witch story?
That's this is the one I've been telling a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite. It's hard to have a favorite, but this is the one that sticks in my mind because it is so weird, I guess. And it's from Truro, Massachusetts, which is on Cape Cod. And basically there's this sea captain named Sylvanus Rich, who is from Cape Cod. He's from Truro. I've seen his grave, so he was an actual person. His grave is still there. But he was sailing from North Carolina up to Boston. He was sailing along the coast of Cape Cod. And he sees in the dunes, he sees this small hut. And he says to his crewmen, like, I'm tired of drinking like just beer and brackish water on this boat. I'm going to row myself over to that hut and see if they have some milk that I can buy. So he gets in the little rowboat. He rows from the main ship over to the land, and the crew sees him go to the hut. Then they see him come back from the hut, rows himself back to the ship. And he's like, look, everybody, I have this bucket of milk that I got from the woman who lives in that hut. And I have to say, that woman in the hut is the ugliest hag I have ever seen in my life. But I bet this milk is really delicious. Okay. So Captain Sylvanus Rich takes his bucket of milk and he goes down into his cabin. As soon as he closes the door, a huge storm comes up out of nowhere. and it like shreds all the sails on the ship and blows the ship out into the middle of the ocean. And so the crew's pounding on the door like, Captain Rich, come out of your cabin. We're in a lot of trouble. He doesn't come out until the next morning. He comes out and he says, last night, that hideous hag came to me while I slept, and she rode me like a horse up and down Cape Cod all night. And he lifts up his shirt and he has like bruises all over his body, like a woman's shoes have been digging into his sides. And he said, she put a magic bridle in my mouth and literally rode me like a horse up and down Cape Cod. And the crew's like, the crew's a little freaked out, but they're like, but Captain, the sails are all shredded. We're adrift in the ocean. He's like, Captain says, sorry, like I have to go back to my cabin and I have to prepare because the witch is coming again tonight. He closes the door. And the crew's like, is he excited to see the witch, or is he freaked out to see the witch? We can't really tell. And so this goes on for like days, where the ship is sort of drifting out in the ocean, and every night Captain Rich is just locked in his cabin, having the witch ride him like a horse up and down Cape Cod. And he's just, the crew is starting to think about mutiny at this point, right? The captain is totally useless. He's bewitched by this milk that he drank from this witch. Finally, another ship appears on the horizon. It draws nearby, and by happy coincidence, the captain of that other ship is Sylvanus Rich's son. And so Sylvanus Rich goes over to his father's boat, his father's ship, goes down to the cabin and goes into the cabin, closes the door, and you hear like heated words happening, but you don't know exactly what's said. And finally, Sylvanus Rich emerges and says, okay, the spell is broken. Let's repair the sails. We have to sail to Boston. So they fix the sails, they sail to Boston, and they arrive in the harbor, and the merchant who's expecting the grain on their ship is there. And the merchant says, Captain Sylvanus Rich, why is this grain so late? You're supposed to be here like 10 days ago. And Sylvanus Rich says, just blame it on the sweet, sweet milk of Satan, is all he says.
He was being rode by a witch.
Being ridden by a witch. That's the end of the story.
Oh my God.
But there were quite a few stories from like the 19th century and even earlier of witches riding people like a horse. They would come to you in the nighttime and put a bridle in your mouth and just ride you like a horse. And like even someone in the Salem witch trials from Haverhill, Massachusetts said that a woman in his town would ride him like a horse at night and his mouth hurt from biting on the metal bit within his teeth.
That's like dominatrix type stuff.
It's it's the sexual imagery is like pretty blatant, I think, right? Pretty blatant.
Well, that's what I was like. It's like, where does this get you? Because obviously there's a shared theme here. It's like, so this isn't the day of the internet. So this is stories that are being passed around. And it's just like how this becomes like a common thing. It's like, oh yeah, that happened to me too.
So
yeah.
So was it ever determined in any research you ever did? Was it something like a ritual, or what was it determined to be? Because I mean, I'm sure a witch had better things to do than come ride somebody like a horse.
Like, I don't even know if there really was a witch, and how did the story show up? Not sure, because we saw Sylvanus Rich's grave in Cape Cod, and like he died when he was 34. I think he wasn't very old when he died. So he had one son who was 11 years old when he died. So it wasn't like his son really was sailing out there in a ship and came to save him. So it's kind of a little murky what the details are. There's a very similar story also from that town on Cape Cod about a sailor who steals donuts. Like he's going to his ship and he walks by this hut and he sees some donuts and he steals the donuts because they're so delicious and eats them all. But then when he's on the ship, a witch comes and rides him every night, and as revenge for him stealing her donuts.
I wonder it was the same witch.
I know, right? It wasn't the same witch. And that story appeared like in the Boston Herald in like 1889 or something like that. So it was people in that town in Cape Cod, I guess, remember that donut story because it's pretty memorable. And Massachusetts is a donut focused state. Like it's the home of Dunkin' Donuts and all that sort of stuff.
See what Mark posted: colonial porn.
That's a new
oh my God.
Colonial porn.
Yeah, that's everybody's sure that's the red papers. Everybody's just sitting here. It's like, oh yeah, I got a seedy story for you. Let me tell you about the witch that. The other one you had out there. It was further on, way down the book, was the Freetown Forest Witch.
Yes, and that one's a little freaky. I think that's a freaky one. I always have to give credit to this story. It's there's a writer named Christopher Balzano who used to live up here in Massachusetts. I think he lives in Florida now and writes paranormal books about Florida. So if you like paranormal things, check out Christopher Balzano.
Okay.
But he used to live in southeastern Massachusetts, and he interviewed people who lived around the Freetown State Forest, which is a big forest down in that part of the state. He interviewed all the people to find out their sort of paranormal stories they told. And there had been some murders in the forest as well and things like that. And so he talked to this guy named Dave, and this was in, let's say, late 90s, early 2000s, so really pretty recent. Talked to this guy named Dave, and Dave told Christopher Balzano that when he was a boy, he and his friends were out playing in the woods. They were little kids, and they heard somebody laughing at them. So they hear this laughter. They can't see anybody, but it sounds like a woman laughing at them. And possibly they see like the outline of a woman, but it's almost like the light is being diffracted off her body, like she's like some sort of invisibility shield. So these little boys are just freaked out, obviously, and all run home. Like, this is really freaky. So they run home. They start to see in their dreams, all these boys, it's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of these boys, start to see in their dreams this older woman appearing outside their bedroom window at night, trying to get in. Like she's tapping on the window, like begging them to let her in, which for the most part they don't do. I'll get to that later. Dave himself, the main informant here, like said that he had a dream where he was an adult man married to this woman. They were living in the woods, and he killed her because she was an adulteress, and also a witch, which is a little freaky dream for like a 10-year-old kid to be having, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Not your average dream that a 10-year-old kid has.
Not at all. I was hoping that she wasn't going to ride them like a horse.
Well, they find like what they think are the ruins of her house out in the woods. And then one of the boys, one night when he's having the dream that she's knocking on the window, actually opens the window and lets her in. And his parents are out in the living room. They hear his screams and they come running into the room, and they see the boy, like wrestling with this invisible entity, basically, that is trying to attack him. They wake him up. He's totally freaked out. And eventually that family moves from the area because they just were so disturbed by what happened. So these boys keep seeing this Freetown witch for years, and it only really stops once they move out of the area. Like she shows up to their windows at night, usually in the autumn, like when it's starting to get darker and colder, she's more active. They see like a large black cat that walks on 2 legs. So they see all these freaky things. And like whether the story is true or not, like it may not even be true. The story may not be true. But it was told in, like, let's say, the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's very similar to some of the stories you would hear from the 1600s. So it is like the malevolent witch who's coming into your bedroom at night to kind of terrorize you, the black cat, the older woman. So it has a lot of similarities to the stories that you would have heard in 1640 or 1650, which I think is really interesting.
So what do you feel? Why do you feel that they're just terrorizing random people? What do you think the people have done to them, or it's somebody else who has cast a spell on these people that's making the witch come bother with these people?
I think, again, I don't think they necessarily were. I don't think they were real witches. I don't think there were real witches involved. I think people always have weird experiences, right? Like you could, let's say you might talk about sleep paralysis now, right? You wake up in the middle of the night and you see a dark entity in your bedroom and you can't move and it's choking you. And when it's over, you say, ooh, that was sleep paralysis. Or you wake up and you see an entity in your bedroom at night and you think, oh my God, it's an alien that's in my bedroom and it's trying to abduct me. Or you could wake up and see a strange entity in your room and you could think, oh my God, it's a witch and she's coming to ride me like a horse up and down Cape Cod. So I think there's people always have the weird experiences, but I think we explain the weird experience in different ways depending on what era we're living in. So very few people now would explain it as a witch, but you might say it's sleep paralysis. Some people might say it was an alien or something like that. I don't even know if aliens are that much of a topic these days, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, during those, I'd be interested to dig more into that, find out if those kids had heard those stories from somewhere, and then it just manifested on. But if they hadn't, that lends such a, another layer to that story. If, how does a 10-year-old come up with something that it sits so, almost flawlessly with a story from hundreds of years prior. That's not something that's just your normal 10-year-old is just going to come up unless they're Stephen King. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, yes, yeah.
Right, and that, the witch tapping on the window reminds me very much of the movie Salem's Lot. If you ever saw the movie Salem's Lot from the 70s, right? The vampires trying to get in the window, tapping on your window at night and things like that.
Yeah, as soon as I'm tapping on the window, first most people should be don't open that window.
Don't open the window.
Yeah, whatever you do, do not say.
Just don't.
We're kind of jumping around the book here too. The other one that I really liked, it was when I was reading it, was The Haunted Church.
Oh yeah,
Cambridge.
In Cambridge, the Cambridgeport Baptist Church is supposed to be haunted. It's an interesting one because it's in the 1800s, and this Baptist church in Cambridge, which is a pretty dense urban area, had burned down, and so they tried to rebuild the church, and then it burns down again, and so the church burns down like twice. And often also strange noises are heard in the area, like shrieking noises and things like this are heard in the area of this church. And a reporter from the Boston Globe goes to investigate, how come this church has burned down twice in a row? That's a little weird. And people say when they put the founding documents in the cornerstone of the church, when they dedicate it, even those would burst spontaneously into flames. And that was starting the fire and burning the church down. So what was happening? And so an old man in the neighborhood says, years ago, a woman lived around here in the 1600s. And, she was in love with a soldier. This soldier went off to war. And another soldier killed him because he wanted to get with this woman. I think her name was Anne Hopkins, according to the story, Anne Hopkins. This other soldier killed Anne Hopkins's boyfriend because he wanted to be with her. So he comes back to Cambridge, is like, oh, Anne Hopkins, I'm sorry, your boyfriend was killed by the enemy, but I'm here and I'll take his place. But as he says this, she notices that he has an article of her dead boyfriend's clothing, and she thinks, oh crap, he's actually killed her and he's just, trying to take over. So this kind of drives her a little crazy. She becomes sort of an outcast in the town. She's hanging out in the swamps at night, all this sort of stuff that makes you suspicious until a pandemic of the time hits, a smallpox outbreak hits Cambridge, and people are looking for somebody to blame. So who do you blame? You blame the outcast. So they say, Anne Hopkins, we just thought you were perhaps crazy, but now we realize you're probably also a witch causing this pandemic. And so they, according to the story, they burn her at the stake. And as she dies, she points at the man who killed her boyfriend and screams at him this spot will be cursed forever. And the old man says to the reporter from the Boston Globe, that is where this church is built, and that's why this church keeps burning down. Which is a great story, but the interesting thing is the Puritans never burned anybody to the stake. They would hang people, but they never burned anybody. That was not their way of executing people. And there's no record of anybody named Anne Hopkins being executed. So is this just a folk tale from the neighborhood? It's not clear. And then there's no real explanation why the church burned down twice, which is pretty strange as well. But the church itself is still there. It has not burned since then. You can still go see the church. And I don't think they say it's haunted anymore.
It kind of kills the story, but it could have simply been as the workers were over there, cooking something and somebody screwed up and knocked, what do we do? Right. It's a witch. It's got to be a witch.
It's a witch's curse. It's a witch's curse. Yeah. We're in this church twice.
Yeah,
Don't blame us.
Yeah. I mean, as you read it, like I said, felt it twice. I mean, in Monty Python suddenly comes in, with the castle scene. It's building the castle in the swamp, falls down, build another one, it burns down, falls over. It's you're at some point, why did you think it's guys, let's just move it over there. This is just not working.
Move it away from the cursed spot where the witch was.
Yeah,
born. Yeah.
And that's so when you're doing these stories, is because a lot of them, I mean, obviously, through this program, I believe people have these abilities. I just whether or not there was. I mean, I'm sure there's some people down there that had what would seem like otherworldly. Like Anne, not Anne. It was I think it was Margaret. See, I'm getting the names messed up. It was the first lady that was
Margaret Jones.
Margaret Jones, yes.
Yeah.
Margaret. I think when you have something like that just has that gift, that knows, man, I've got this toothache. Oh, here, chew this. Do this right here, and it goes away. It seems, excuse me, seems just crazy, compared to, when you have everybody else, these modern, what they would consider modern medicine, tell you, no, we got to do these weird techniques, and then somebody like, this can't be, this has to be otherworldly. But at the same time, it's like, how does this go from being just, to such a hysteria that we're taking this gift? I mean, whether you want to call it God gift, universal gift to humanity, and then just saying, no, put them on a stake, burn them, hang them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there were some other women who were healers at the time who were accused of being witches, and some people have theorized that they were in competition with male doctors. And so the male physicians who would, the ones who would like stick leeches on you and bleed you and do those other harsher things, didn't like the competition, right? And so they would maybe start these accusations against people for being witches and try to get them out of business that way. And there was even a man named Roger Toothaker, who in the Salem witch trials, he was an herbal healer also, and a doctor actually was one of the people who accused him. Like a physician was like, oh, I accuse Roger Toothaker of being a witch. And they were business rivals. They were both competing for the same patients.
Wow. Do you believe that warlocks are hybrids of witches? In some research that I've done, it said that witches are like hybrid, warlocks are hybrids of witches. It's because they sell their soul, the witches, and they become warlocks. Do you believe there's any correlation with that, or that's just something somebody decided to write?
I guess what I've read, like, again, I don't think there are any real witches, but the Puritans used the word witch to refer to both men and women, right? Both men and women were called a witch. The witchcraft law they passed in 1641 is like, any man or woman that hath a familiar spirit shall be put to death, or whatever, something like that. Like that was, so they both basically said witches were men and women. Sometimes men also had other terms applied to them, like they could be called a wizard, they could be called a conjurer, they could be called a necromancer, they could be called a warlock, but it was all the same. Basically, it was just kind of a matter of degree. Basically, like everybody was a witch, and some people were extra special, like you could be a wizard or a conjurer. It's like a different level in Dungeons and Dragons almost, or something like that.
Yep.
But only really for men. Women were just always the witches.
So since you don't believe in witches per se, do you believe in the rituals that are done by people who practice witchcraft?
Right. Yeah, that's because they're like, the word witch has a lot of different meanings. There's like the witches that we're talking about tonight, like from the 1600s, like those witches that were innocent people accused falsely and executed. Then there's sort of witches you get in like fairy tales, like the witch in the gingerbread house and Hansel and Gretel, even the witch in the Wizard of Oz, or the Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe, like those sorts of witches. And then there are like contemporary people who practice witchcraft as like a spiritual path or a religion. So, Wiccans or folks like that. And I don't really talk about those in my book because I think that's a different approach. You know what I mean? It's like, I've been to Wiccan rituals and it's not the same thing as what the Puritans were complaining about. Like that, it's a different thing entirely, but the word is the same, if you know what I mean.
Makes sense.
There was right here. It's just, and Ron, I do think myself, I mean, we'll ask Peter to comment on this one. Would anyone practice psychic abilities, be considered witches? I mean, I'm going to say yes. I mean, it's just obviously if you're like, you're going to fall down, as you're walking home tomorrow, it's pretty much going to get you on the trial.
Yeah, there were actually a couple people in the Salem witch trials who were executed who were fortune tellers. There was a guy in particular named Samuel Wardwell, who was very accurate at his predictions. He was like a farmer. He was doing like normal Puritan stuff, but in his spare time, he would read people's palms and things like that. And again, he was very effective. Like he could accurately predict things. So then people sort of, when the Salem witch trials started, like, boy, how come his fortune telling skills are so good? Like that doesn't seem natural. He must be a witch. And he was executed for that.
Isn't that the hypocrisy that, you have all these people that can declare that this person's a witch and that they're not put on trial for then, also having this unearthly ability to declare what people are. It's like how are they not? It seems like it would be the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, wait a minute, you just said it too. It's like, oh God, that person's thrown in jail. It just like
Right.
keeps.
Yeah, they had this idea, which unfortunately, like, one of the reasons the Salem witch trials were so big, because there have been I think there's something like 85 witch trials between 1641 and 1691, and most of those were really small, like 1 or 2 people. And in Massachusetts, only 5 people were executed. Only 5. Like, if you're one of the 5, it's still a lot. Between 1641 and 1691, 5 women were executed. Then when the Salem witch trials come along, 19 people are executed. It's like 14 women, 5 men. 1 person is crushed to death while being tortured. Several people die in prison, and over 150 people total are accused. So it was like a big, viral spread of witchcraft. And, one of the things that helped feed that was the court at that time. They made this decision to accept what they called spectral evidence, right? So spectral evidence means that, let's say, I say I'm being attacked by a witch. Like, I go to the judge, say, I'm being attacked by Craig, who's a witch. And what I'm seeing is Craig's specter, like Craig's spirit form, is coming to me and attacking me. He's got like pins, he's sticking them in my skin, whatever. So no one else can see Craig's specter leave his body except me, because I'm bewitched. Craig could just be sitting there in the courtroom, like twiddling his thumbs, but I'm like, no, Craig is sticking pins in my body this very minute, like his specter is being sent out of his body to attack me. And they accepted that as valid evidence.
Wow.
That was valid evidence. I could just be totally lying. I could be hallucinating, whatever. They accepted it as valid evidence. And that's why they ended up with like such a huge number of people, because they were accepting that evidence without any other backup.
Wow, I'm glad they don't do it that way nowadays, because somebody's wife gone. Like, hey, my wife is a witch. She and mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah, I just show like here's a jar from the the witch pins.
Yeah. Which, people supposedly said that pins were being stuck in their body, and then they would produce these pins and say, these are the pins that were stuck in my body. And like, did you just have that hidden in your pocket maybe or something to, get revenge on somebody you didn't like? Because I think...
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think, the Puritans did believe in witches, but I also think that some people were taking advantage of the witch trials to get revenge on their enemies, right? On their political enemies or people in town they just didn't like, or things like that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too, because that's, you were looking through there, and like when you read these ones, I mean, especially the one. God, I don't know why I'm having such a trouble with names. Look, what am I doing? Look at this. Wow, we just went sucked into a portal there. I'm not sure what happened.
It's like,
yeah, we'll take that off there before we're all just like hypnotized. No, it's the girl that she went on that spree of just accusing everybody of being a witch, and it was, for the most part, she was just making it up. I mean, it was just to cover her actions. And it's like you said, this thing got so out of control. I mean, just we'll go back to Margaret Jones. Here's these 2 people that are coming over from it to make a new life. They both got this amazing, they're great people, they're helping people, and she ends up being killed because she knows how to heal, take care of your stuff. And then he's forced to flee, and just, you're looking, what could those 2 have changed? How many lives could those 2 have affected and improved? And it was all because of this. Just somebody just, makes an accusation, and hang him.
Yeah. There was a case in Littleton, Massachusetts, which is kind of west of Boston, and 3 girls there. It was 17, I think it was 1710 or 1720. So several years after the Salem witch trials had ended. And just to point out, the Salem witch trials were the last trials in Massachusetts and in New England for witchcraft, because people kind of realized, like, boy, that was a big mess. We can't believe all those innocent people were killed. They didn't necessarily stop believing in witches. They just realized you can't prove it in a court. Like, you can't prove the existence of a witch or of the devil in a court. So people still did believe in witches, but they just didn't have witch trials. So in 1720 in Littleton, these three young sisters, like 8, 9, and 10 or something like that, all started to say they were being bewitched. And they would often be found in the middle of a pond, like, help, a witch, somehow transported me into the middle of this pond. Somebody has to pull me out. Or I'm stuck at the top of a tree. A witch put me up here. Someone has to get a ladder and bring me down. And in addition, they'd be stuck on top of the house, whatever, like all these places they'd get stuck, and they'd always blame it on a witch. They would say that, they would do the usual witchcraft symptoms, like, barking like a dog and running around like a bird and all these things, right? And they always saying, oh, it's a witch, it's a witch. And finally, the people in Littleton, like, well, who is the witch? You have to name her. If there's a witch in this town, we need to know. And so the girls were like, it's Abigail Dudley. She lives down the street. It's Abigail Dudley. And Abigail Dudley was this mother of 13 children. She was one of the original colonists who had settled the town with her husband. And suddenly, these girls were accusing her of being a witch. And so it seemed like there would have been a witch trial, but Abigail Dudley died suddenly of natural causes, probably because she had 13 children, which is a lot of children to have. So she died of natural causes, so that was the end. There was no trial. And several years later, when the oldest girl who had accused her was living on her own in another town, this girl was attending a church service, and the minister was preaching about how liars go to hell, right? Liars do not go to heaven, liars go to hell. And this girl started to cry, and just tears were running down her face. And she confessed to the minister that she and her sisters had lied. They had made the whole thing up. They just wanted attention. And when they were pressured by people in town to name somebody, they just named the first name that came to mind. And so really, I mean, that's a good case that shows how easy it would be for innocent people, I think, to be accused of witchcraft.
That's crazy.
And that, luckily she confessed, so that's how people.
Yeah, everybody just treats it kind of like, oh, well, I guess we won't make that mistake again. And then what happens? A couple of days later, make that mistake again. I like to, like, one of the things you did, I think it was right in the beginning, and you kind of touched on a few things. It's just how you kind of do, like, all of us have done that. We're going through life and growing up, especially in this modern thing. It's like, there's always that creepy house. There's always that one, and everybody, there's always that rumors like, don't go in there. That's that witch. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a kid, there was an older woman who lived up the street from us. And, her house was super run down. Like, the shades were always down. The grass in the yard was knee high. She had a car that didn't drive that was full of newspapers. She had like 25 cats, whatever. And somebody at one point said, oh, yeah, I think she's a witch. And that really stuck in my brain. And I was always afraid, like, oh, she might be a witch. Like, I should cross the street. And then she got a dog, this big black dog that had no hair on its back. Its back was entirely hairless. And I'm like, oh, that cinched the deal for me. Like, that's when I knew that she was a witch. Of course, I was wrong. Like, she was not a witch. But there's just that kind of mentality of, like, the outsider, and you're a little bit afraid of them, So
yeah, and hopefully people are getting that, from their saying. That's why I said he's only, we're kind of picking and choosing little things here too, but all of the stories in the book are like this, and that's what's so cool. It's just they're all in these cases where different one, like the witch caves. That one was a great story too.
Yeah. Yeah, the witch caves are in Ashland Ashland, Massachusetts, and it's after the Salem trials ended in 1692, some of the people still living in Salem wanted to get out of town. Like, we don't want to live in this town with the people who killed our family, basically, right? The people whose relatives had been hanged as witches wanted to get the heck out of there. And so they all headed out of Salem, following like an Indian trail, a Native American trail, whatever you want to call it, out to Ashland, Massachusetts. And they were given land there to settle, but for the time being, when they got there, they had no place to live. And so they moved into these caves. And so those caves are still there, and they're called the Witch Caves. And so it's a cool name. You can go visit them. We went to visit them, and they were mostly filled up with leaves at this point. Like, I didn't go inside because I was afraid I would just sink up to my neck in leaves, and who knows what was at the bottom of them. But you can still see these witch caves, which is pretty interesting, The road is called Salem End Road because it was They left Salem and then
That's
they stopped. So that was the end,
that,
like Salem End
that's
Road.
that's a cool, that's fitting name for it. I was scrolling through here. I looked, and there was the one where it was the Goody Glover,
Mm.
and that one, kind of just a little tease. I'll let you go, but the part where they're doing the interrogation, it just, you can see right away here's a problem, and I said, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
So Goody Glover was this was like 1688, I think, is the year. She lived in Boston. She was an Irish woman. She was Catholic, and she worked as a washerwoman. So she took in people's laundry, basically. And one of her customers accused Goody Glover or her daughter of stealing their sheets. And so Goody Glover came and like screamed at the children, like, no, like yelled at them and swore at them or whatever. The children that she swore at became very traumatized, and they started to exhibit like the classic witchcraft symptoms, like their tongue would hang out of their mouth and they would, crawl around on their backs and speak in tongues or whatever. And so they said, oh, Goody Glover has bewitched us because she screamed at us because we said she stole our sheets. And so Goody Glover was brought into trial. And so Boston at the time was like a Puritan town. It was an English town. And there were some people who were not English or not Puritan, but there weren't a lot of them. And so Goody Glover was Irish, she was Catholic, and she didn't really speak English. She only spoke Gaelic. And so when they brought her on, put her on trial, it was a totally biased trial. Like the records call her a hag and things like that. So we're putting the hag on trial. And then they say like, oh, she only spoke Gaelic. But then they also say things like, oh, when we interrogated her, she confessed that she was a witch. Like, how did that happen if she didn't even know what she was saying and you couldn't understand what she was saying?
yep,
They tried to get her to say the Lord's Prayer, which is supposedly something a witch cannot do. She couldn't do it. I couldn't say the Lord's Prayer probably if I was put on trial. I would probably be too stressed also. So she was executed in 1688 for being a witch. And it was pretty clear that, a big part of it was because she was Irish and Catholic, which is ironic because Boston now is super Irish and super Catholic.
yeah, exactly. But that was the part that stuck out to me. It's like, none of us could do it. I mean, if any of us were handed the Lord's Prayer right now, written in Gaelic,
right?
You tell me how many, all four of us are going to fail this.
Yes.
We're not going to be able to say the prayer. And it doesn't mean that all four of us are witches. I mean, that's, that was the part that, just the way you lay out these stories, that's the part I love, is just, you see just the problems with their, and that was where kind of with my question was like, do you think that the governor was behind, that there was a little more to it, obviously, it's hard, you can't go back in the Wayback Machine and ask him, but it's just, it almost seems like there was something more to it than just simple, believe in God or you're of the devil. It just seems like there was something more of like, I know how I can ensure that everybody's so fearful of their neighbors, nobody's watching me. I'm not going to be touched. And that's where it seems like here with the, because it just, some of these things, like you said, right there, you mean to tell me there's not anybody that's in law that would have come up and said, hey, there's a problem with this. It's like, this wasn't a fair trial in any way. I mean, which is, I'm not siding with her. I'm just saying, she doesn't speak it. I mean, come on.
Right. They didn't really have, it wasn't a lot of professional lawyers at the time, right? It was, it's ministers filling in, doing everything, being lawyers, and then maybe just some wealthy people are going to be a judge. It wasn't, they didn't have the professional training we have now. Even like the physicians and the doctors, they were just like making it up as they went along. Like, there were no medical schools. It was just like they learned from somebody and they taught somebody, and it was not what we have now. So, but I agree. It's, you can see the political biases came into play. And were they deliberate, or was it just kind of like an unconscious bias against people who are Irish and Catholic, or older women, or whoever the people who were often, accused of witchcraft?
It was probably a nice combination.
Yeah, and the Salem, one of the reasons the Salem witch trials finally ended is because, the number of people kept expanding to like this 150, kept growing, and somebody then accused the governor's wife of being a witch, and that's when he shut it down. He's like, okay, this trial is over. Like, don't accuse my wife of being a witch. Like, the trial is over now.
Yeah, that's what kind of what made me go down that track, of thinking is like, I wonder if there was something else behind this, because it just, when it gets to there, it's like, no, it's absolutely not. It's like, yeah, we found them all. We've caught all the witches. There's no witches. The witches are gone. It's just, yeah, but no, as we're getting up here too, it's people, but I mean, everybody, it's at Amazon.com. Go, Barnes and Noble, books. You just go there, purchase this book. I mean, it came out. It's really, really interesting, fascinating stories. I mean, it's a real fun read. And you can check them out at newenglandfolklore.blogspot.com. You keep that everything up to date there. Like I said, you've got two, at least a couple posts a month that you do there. Yeah. I'm not mistaken. So yeah, want to also, definitely want Michelle Freed, want to thank her, for helping set this up too, because that's, she did that. I really appreciate that. And give you a second here, plug your publisher, just let people know about other information. Like I said, the floor is yours.
Oh, sure. I mean, again, just the book Witches and Warlocks of Massachusetts just came out last month, available pretty much wherever you buy books online. It's about 70 different stories about witches, plus multiple stories just about the Salem witch trial. So probably, I don't know, it's like 80 little different segments of the book. So, and it's, for general readers, it is not an academic book by any means. So it's pretty accessible, I think, to pretty much anybody who's interested in stories about witches. And it's good. It's Halloween season, right? So you can read some spooky stuff. And again, like, what's scarier, a witch or a witch hunt? I will leave that up to you. I kind of think maybe a witch hunt might be scarier. So things to think about as we go towards Halloween.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was perfect to have you on here to talk about that, because we're definitely getting into that season where everybody's witches, ghosts, everything perfect. And so, Peter, I mean, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I mean, I really appreciate it. It's
been great, and happy birthday again. Happy 46.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate that. That was it was just I was excited to do this, and I said this was one. I couldn't thought better, one of the better ones to have on October. It's the best month. Hey, I'm kind of biased. So that's all right. Well, thank you very much. Have a great night, and like I said, we'll definitely be in touch, and especially as you get something else out, we'll see about getting you back on to discuss that one as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. I look forward to it. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Well, happy Halloween, and have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. This episode brought to you by threebeardspodcast.com. We're still looking for a sponsor, if you couldn't tell. But hey, you can go to merchandise there, click that, support us that way. That's how we fund and keep these beards looking not homeless. I mean, as you can see, the guys down below are starting to keep there, and we still need to get that thing. So, especially when we bring on the guest beard, we gotta have the thing that pops up that says guest beard. Still got to get that. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Check us out on all the social medias. Like, subscribe, please share that, comment. That seems to be really helps out, get the thing out there as people talk there. But, I thank everybody for watching. Appreciate all the birthday wishes, everybody. Thank you. Stay tuned for the next show. The guys are going to be talking college football, and I'm not going to be on that one because I'm going to go have birthday dinner. So everybody, thanks for watching. Peace out. Good night.